I mean, listen, guys, tariffs definitely will impact us. That's just the reality of the situation here. And it honestly depends on what exactly is being tariffed. Or who is being tariffed? Like, do we get a lot of things from them? If that's the case, then yeah, they'll definitely affect us. There's almost no way around that affecting us. I mean, we can talk and act like it's not going to, but it is definitely. Like the only way to actually rectify a lot of these situations is if the companies that are building outside of the United States of America and shipping within the United States of America, they were to come to America, the United States of America, right, and build everything here, hire Americans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like that would be the only way they can kind of avoid the tariffs specifically, is to build things here. Now that will be beneficial to like employment if Americans actually wanted to do those jobs, right? So there are a couple of like glaring issues. We could talk about it, but I think at the end of the day, there's almost no way around this, right? I mean, tariffs are going to increase prices because a lot of companies are just not going to come here. What they're going to do is they're going to pass that 25% tariff or whatever it is onto the person buying something. We really like to have fruit that does not belong in winter, if that makes any sense, right? We import a lot of tropical fruit. So if we start tariffing, let's say, putting tariffs on countries that produce a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we consume out of season, then expect to see increases in prices during those times, right? Now, I do know the concept of tariffs are also being pretty much put on the table to find a way to get rid of the IRS, basically income taxes and things like that. That is an option. It definitely worked in the United States of America. Like 80 years ago, it definitely worked for the country. 100% it did. But let's see where this takes us, guys. If there's any new information, I would love to encounter it. I'm pretty much open-minded on nearly every topic we can encounter. But let's check it out. How Trump's tariffs may impact prices for Americans. This is a suggestion via Discord. Let's jump into it.
Take a look at this. The Dow Jones. Oof. And specifically notice when it starts getting red, right around 1:30 or so. Yeah, in the last hour, Wall Street investors appear to be rattled after the White House said that President Trump is sticking to his February 1st deadline for new tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. Tariffs that could raise prices for many products that Americans buy, potentially stoking inflation.
Hey guys, I'm gonna be honest here. I think China's tariffs should be higher because they don't really allow us to sell many things in their country, right? So the fact that that's the case, I think we should basically tariff them much higher.
Let's get the latest from CNN's Matt Egan. Matt, what can you tell us about these tariffs and what it could mean for the price of everyday goods?
Well, Boris, we could be on the verge of the first shots being fired in what would be a trade war in North America. Because remember, it's not just these 25% tariffs that have been threatened by President Trump on Canada and on Mexico. It's also the retaliation that they have promised as well. And as you pointed out, this did not go over so well on Wall Street. The moment that this news came out from the White House that the tariffs are still on track to happen, we did see a noticeable dip in the stock market with the Dow moving solidly lower. Now, look, we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. It's still possible that President Trump decides to delay when these tariffs get implemented or cancel them altogether. But we do know that he views these tariffs as sort of a magical negotiating tool that can solve almost any problem. Of course,
because it kind of can. Right. I mean, if you threaten it, then most likely the people will definitely capitulate. Why? Because they don't want their citizens to be hit with absolute craziness. Right. So for the most part, it's a bully tactic, but it's a tactic that generally will work because the countries do not want additional tariffs on them. That's the reality. They want to be able to take advantage of the U.S. population. So if you take that access away, yeah, they're going to get scared and most likely turn around and say, you know what? Yeah, I think you're right. I'll do whatever you say. That's the reality.
This would be a risky gamble because the United States imports a lot of goods from Canada and from Mexico, not to mention from China as well. Last year alone, the U.S. imported $400 billion of goods from Canada,
we need their lumber.
From oil and minerals to cement, wood, and paper goods. This is also a major place where the United States imports food from Mexico in particular, right? Roughly 90% of the avocados that get imported into the United States come from Mexico. Same thing.
Yeah, but that's all eaten in California and things like that. I'm joking, guys. I mean, the thing is, maybe we should not be so spoiled in this context here. My wife regularly says about Americans, at least, she says we've never suffered. We haven't suffered in a very long time, like the country she's from. They suffered, but the thing is that without suffering, you'll never get actually stronger. So if you're someone who is obsessed with eating avocado, all right, maybe don't eat avocado. Right? Allow the tariffs, but to say, you know what? Let me see. These tariffs are affecting avocados. I think I can go a couple of months without avocados. I think so.
For tomatoes, the auto industry in North America is also very closely linked together.
Mexico.
That's why analysts have said that tariffs like this would be devastating to the auto industry and would lift the price of the average cost sold, the cost of the average car sold in the United States by $3,000. Now, meanwhile, there's also the risk that all of this could lift gasoline prices because Canada is the biggest source of foreign oil into the United States. The U.S. imports about 4 million barrels of oil from Canada every single day. Look at that. That's 4 times as much as what is imported from OPEC. Mexico is also a major source of foreign oil. And big oil, the oil industry, is pleading with the White House to shield oil and natural gas from these imports. They're warning that Canada is just such a crucial source of oil into the refineries that what could happen is you could see gasoline prices go significantly higher. Gas Buddy has said that if these 25% tariffs go into effect, gas prices in the Great Lakes region could go up by up to 50 cents per gallon. Similarly, go significantly higher in the Midwest and in the Rocky Mountains as well. And so,
yeah, bro, it's going to be like, he said 50 cents in the Great Lakes. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to go ahead and say that it'd probably be like 50 cents to $1. Easy.
Well, that's why we've got to pay very close attention to what happens next and whether or not the White House ends up putting the tariffs in place, but perhaps having some sort of a carve out so that it doesn't impact gasoline prices. Because, Boris, if we've learned anything the last few years, it's that people care very much about how much the price of gasoline is.
It's perhaps part of the reason the price of everyday goods, why Donald Trump got elected. And we should quickly point out, Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, was asked about exceptions specifically for oil and oil products, and she didn't have any specifics. She said that we would find out within the next 24 hours. So Matt Egan will check in again once these tariffs are rolled out to see whether there was a carve out or not. Thanks so much, Matt.
That would actually be super smart if there was some type of carve out for the things that we actually utilize. Like, don't add any tax, don't tariff that. Let's say the only things we won't tariff are going to be these things that we actually like for real need and require to kind of maintain our Americanness. Let's say, right? But for the other things, no tariff.
In one survey of economists, 95% agree that tariffs will likely mean higher prices for consumers.
They will.
Let's discuss this new data with Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's. Mark, thanks so much for sharing.
Guys, the countries are not going to bend over, and I think that's the thing here, guys. Like, if you're referring to China specifically or Mexico, like, they're not going to move things because they can't. Like, a lot of it is agricultural, right? So it's situational. Like, it's there because they have the climate to grow the things in times where it's freezing here, right? So that's how you can still get your tomatoes and avocado, right? So if that's something that you're consuming on a regular basis, it's just going to get really expensive, period, right? It is what it is in this context. I can't imagine how a tariff, even a tariff carve out, could work for this scenario. They cannot, like, actually, they cannot move that here, right? Like, there's nothing they can do to mitigate the cost. They would just have to pass it on to the customer because they're not going to take a profit loss. Right? But either way.
Part of your afternoon with us. These tariffs looming over the weekend. The White House would not give details on whether there would be exceptions for things like oil products. I wonder how you think the markets and consumers are going to be affected by this.
Well, Boris, it depends, right? It depends on how high the tariffs are, which products, if there are going to be exemptions or carve-outs, how long the tariffs will be in place. So there's a lot of imponderables. which highlights one of the problems with tariffs, and that is it creates a lot of uncertainty for businesses and consumers, and is a problem for economic growth. But it's hard to answer that question because we just literally don't know. I mean, we could play an experiment. Let's say that the president follows through and imposes 25% tariffs on all goods, imported goods from Canada and Mexico, and 10% on all goods from China. No exemptions, no carve outs, and keeps them in place for a year. Then that would add 6 to 0.7% to consumer price inflation. So just to make that concrete, instead of, say, inflation being 2% over the next year, it would be 2.6 or 2.7%. But that,
basically like $10 eggs, guys. Let me just break it down. It's like $10 eggs for like an 18 pack of eggs. Let's say $10 is what he's saying.
That's extreme. That's kind of an outside kind of scenario. I doubt the president has that in mind, but that gives you kind of context.
I'm sure he does.
This afternoon, in response to the message from the White House, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded saying that if the U.S. moves ahead, quote, Canada is ready with a forceful and immediate response. How would a trade war potentially take shape? And specifically, which products coming from Mexico and Canada, for example, do you think consumers might wind up paying more for?
Yeah, well,
Mexico's
of course,
easy.
Prime Minister Trudeau's comments highlight another problem with broad-based tariffs, and that is other countries are going to respond. They're going to retaliate, just like they did in President Trump's first term when he imposed tariffs, on China, and that costs American jobs. It hurts manufacturers who export a lot of product. It hurts farmers and agricultural industries because they export a lot of product. So it does a lot of damage. The kind of, if you look at what we import from Canada, Mexico, China, it's a wide array of products. It's 35% of all of the imported goods that we bring into the country come from those three countries. Those are the big three countries from which we get imports. So it's everything from cars
allies
to electronics, furniture, fresh food. We get a lot of avocados and berries and tomatoes from Mexico.
Depending on the season, guys, but
machine tools, from Canada, we get a lot of oil, lumber. So, the cost of home construction is very high, and
Canada.
This would add to it and make it more difficult to afford to buy a home. So just a wide array of products would be affected by the higher tariffs. Again, Boris, if there are no exemptions and carve-outs.
Right. You mentioned the potential for inflation to go up somewhat.
It will.
Obviously, it hit a high a few years ago, but it's still sort of a stubborn inflation that hasn't gone down as much as the Fed would like. I wonder why you think that is.
People never stop spending. Listen to what Jerome Powell has stated. If you would just stop spending, guess what would happen? Right? All of the manufacturers and people that are building things and selling things to you would realize that their stock is starting to sit on the shelves. So what would happen is naturally inflation will go down pretty much exclusively based on the fact that you're not buying things, right? And so if you stop buying things, they have to then lower the prices to reality. Right? But the fact is, just like Jerome Powell said, if you keep buying it, then you can afford it. What's the problem? Why are you complaining about inflation? You keep buying it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's come way back from where it was, but it's still not back to something that the Federal Reserve feels comfortable with. That's their so-called 2% inflation target. We got data today, for example, Boris, that showed inflation was 2.6, 2.7%. So it's still a bit elevated. I think it's a range of things, but a big part of the difference between current inflation and the Fed's target is the cost of the growth in the cost of housing. Rents have been up, and that has kept the housing costs up, and that's what's reflected there. But inflation remains persistent. Really, nothing makes Americans
he's an economist
more anxious than having to pay more for groceries and for rent and for gasoline. And clearly, broad-based tariffs would add to that angst.
Okay, hold on, guys.
I think it's a range of things, but a big part of the difference between current inflation and the Fed's target is that's what's reflected there. But inflation remains persistent. Really, nothing makes Americans more anxious.
Oh, bro, I forgot. I can't even find where. Okay, It's interesting, guys. I mean, the cost of housing is definitely intriguing. It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's specifically tied to rent like that. I don't know about that, bro. That sounds weird. The prices of rent are definitely tied to the interest rate that Jerome Powell basically has set and refuses to let, go down. But I understand. Don't let it go down, bro. Like, if you see that people are out here spending in stupid manners and racking up debt on their credit card, like, why would you lower the interest rate so they'll then spend more? I would say raise it. Right? Raise the interest rate. That in return would make it so people can no longer actually afford. That's terrible. If you raise the interest rate, then people can actually just no longer afford houses, period. They're already overinflated in terms of the prices because we're kind of stuck in like a real estate bubble. I get that. But lowering the interest rate would make it so more people can afford houses. That then in return, more of the super rich people can also afford those same houses, and they'll just buy them up. BlackRock will walk in and be like, I'll take that whole town. Thank you. Right? I'm telling you, that's what will happen. So maybe that's not a good idea. I would say raise it. Raise the interest rate and force the commercial realtors and people that are a part of commercial real estate specifically to be able to give up their locations. Right. And when that starts to happen, the bank starts losing massive amounts of money on those deals. They'll basically pressure the Federal Reserve. No, I don't want, never mind, guys. No, I'm sorry, guys. Don't lower the interest rate. Not yet. It's not time. It needs to be done at the perfect time. And this is when the Federal Reserve can basically come back and say people are spending less money and holding less money on their credit cards. When that can happen, when Americans learn, okay, when Americans can finally learn to stop leaving things on their credit card, like, listen, if you cannot afford it, if you cannot afford to pay your card off at the end of the month, don't use your card at all. Don't use it at all, right? And then what will end up happening is you'll start to notice, because you're spending less and buying less, right? You'll start to notice that the prices are starting to come down. Like, it's like basic economics, guys. Now, will the Trump tariffs affect the economy? Oh, in a massive way. Massive way. But I'm also not like against it like that, because it being used as like a bargaining chip to force people to stop taking advantage of us is great. I definitely hope that a lot of the companies in Europe that make medicine specifically for the United States of America, hopefully you start targeting those countries, Trump. I'm going to be honest. Because if you think that it's acceptable to within your country or within the European Union, you charge I don't know, like $2 to $3 for things. Example, my wife's father is on Ozempic. He's in the south of Spain. He pays $3. Okay. Ozempic in the United States of America is over $1,000 for the same exact thing. There's no difference here, right? These countries are taking advantage of us, bro. So if you want to actually be for the people, you get what I mean? What I would heavily suggest is fix the medicine and the medical sector of society. Fix that. Fix the hospitals. Fix the medical insurance companies that charge you all this money and then deny your claims. And then we have to feel bad when someone basically, punctures someone's head, let's say, right? You get what I mean here, right? I want you to understand the depths and complexities kind of this scenario. If you're going to utilize the tariffs as a bargaining chip, I think it's completely fine. If we have to deal with the repercussions of said bargaining chip, I'm also moderately fine with it, guys. I'm fine with it. As long as you're going to represent the country well and get the things that we actually need and require, stop some of the waste that we're spending in the country, great. I'm very fiscally conservative, guys. Socially, I'm a little bit different, guys. I'm pretty much open to a lot of social things, right? But like, as long as it's logical, you're not going to catch me with the illogical nonsense and feelings and all this other garbage, right? But very fiscally conservative, very. We're wasting too much money. We're sending too much money to irrelevant places around the world that do not actually benefit us in any real meaningful way other than making us feel good about spending the money in the place, right? And again, if we have that much money to send to other countries, then that means obviously we are paying way too much money in taxes. And if that's the case, then let's do a tariff system and take away income taxes and taxes in general and let other countries pay our taxes, since we're going to be giving it to them anyway, right? And see, that would change, I think, a lot of the feelings and vibes, let's say. Like the reason why Trump got elected in the first place. Like, we're all sick of the nonsense, bro. But either way, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. I'm sorry for talking your ears off, guys. I'm just very frustrated. But either way. The fact that you just made it to the end of the video says a whole lot, actually. We have a couple other channels. MrLboyd Music, MrLboyd Movie Reacts, along with MrLboyd Discusses, where I just generally speak about the things that specifically matter to me. But in the meantime, I'll catch you guys later.